the name of Deputy Broughan. Deputy.
Thanks, Cahir. Well, Minister, obviously you had a very successful visit by the Chinese Prime Minister, Mr. Li Keqiang, and I think you also met your own counterpart, their Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Wang Yi, and progress was made, obviously, in relation to the lifting of the 15-year BSE-related ban, and these changes, obviously, and this meeting is important. So I want to ask you, did you raise, though, with Mr. Wang or with Mr. Li the whole issue? And you know, early in the government we had the visit of the Chinese President himself, President Xi. Did you raise the situation of these two large autonomous, so-called autonomous regions of China, Tibet and also the Uyghur nation?
The Minister has 2 minutes.
The government follows events in Tibet and in Xinjiang Uyghur region on a very close basis. Ireland, together with European Union partners, believe that constructive dialogue between the Chinese government and the representatives of the Dalai Lama is the best way to address differences and tensions in Tibet and to reach a solution that respects Tibetan culture and language and religion and identity. It's important for the long-term peace and stability of the region that the two sides come to an agreement on the future of Tibet, and to this end we continue to encourage a resumption of meaningful dialogue. Ireland respects the territorial integrity of China and recognises the necessity of preventing acts of terrorism, as well as the adoption of counter-terrorism strategies that seek to prevent acts of terrorism. We condemn all acts of violence. However, we also take the view that security forces should practice restraint in exercising their competencies to avoid providing fuel for further radicalisation and support. We are mindful of the EU's call on the Chinese authorities to address some of the deep-rooted causes of the frustration of the Uyghurs, ensuring that their right to practice their own culture and language and religion is respected. And we support that call. Through the formal network of the EU-China Human Rights Dialogue, which was established in 1995, the EU countries continue to share with China its experience in the field of human rights protection and promotion, and to urge China to take clear steps to improve the human rights situation. At the most recent dialogue, which took place in December 2014 in Brussels, the European Union and China held discussions on human rights issues, including the rights of persons belonging to religious minorities. The dialogue allowed the two sides to have a detailed exchange of views on a wide range of human rights issues, with a specific focus on recent developments in China, including the rights of minorities in Tibet. I did have the opportunity the weekend of meeting my counterpart from China, Wang Yi, and I did have the opportunity of mentioning the situation in Tibet and the matter of human rights.
Deputy.
Well, I welcome that comment by the Minister. I know when he was a backbencher, like myself, he did express concern for the repression of religious minorities, such as the Christians of Pakistan. And in this case, obviously, in relation to Tibet, you know, we're dealing with a history now, a 60-year history of repression of this nation, of its Buddhist religion, of its very profound ancient traditions. And I think it has to be said, the international campaign for Tibet did make a presentation, Minister, I think at the 28th UN Council in Geneva in relation to the human rights situation there and to the growing despair at times of the Tibetan people. And it has to be said, we had a lot of outrage recently about Crimea, but it has to be said, obviously, that what happened in 1958-59 when the People's Republic absorbed Tibet was, in fact, the absorption of a historic, ancient, millennia-old nation. And in relation to the Uyghurs, the World Uyghur Congress, as you know, has detailed long lists of repression. The Uyghur Human Rights and Democracy Foundation states that Uyghurs are subjected to compulsory unpaid labour in the construction of a pipeline planned to export local petroleum resources to other parts of China. Uyghurs also continue to be the only population in China consistently subjected to executions for political crimes. These executions are both summary and public. I know there's been a UN training seminar for Uyghur youth in Geneva in November, but we've had continuous, fairly serious repression of a region which used to be known, as you know, as East Turkmenistan. Now, it seems that the Uyghur government in exile in Kazakhstan, Minister, is looking for countries like ourselves with our history, our unique history, but very similar in relation to this kind of repression, to speak up for them. So what can you do, Minister, to take a much more vigorous role in speaking up for these two repressed nations? It's 100 years ago. We're reflecting on the period 1915-1923 at the moment, Minister.
Deputy,
and
I will come back to you,
obviously, yeah, thanks, Caroline.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just make 3 points in reply, Caroline. Firstly, we will continue to voice our concerns and raise these issues with our European partners, because we believe a stronger EU voice of 28 is perhaps more appropriate in many circumstances than one. But from my own point of view, and from Ireland's point of view, I personally raised concerns in relation to persecution on the basis of religion or belief when I addressed the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva in March. Ireland raised these same concerns in interactive dialogues with the Human Rights Council Special Representative on Freedom of Religion or Belief and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion during the 69th session of the Third Committee in 2014. And at the weekend, when we did have an opportunity, both the Taoiseach and Premier Lee Keqiang and myself, with my counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang, we had a good discussion in a spirit of friendship in which we recalled Ireland's deep commitment to human rights, the public concern in Ireland in relation to human rights in China, and the issues upon which we respectfully disagree, including capital punishment. We welcomed the resumption of the EU-China human rights dialogue last December and expressed a strong wish that it will proceed again this year. I had a useful, open, informal discussion with my Chinese counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang, on these issues. We discussed the current situation in Tibet, with particular reference to the humanitarian situation in the aftermath of recent earthquakes in Nepal. So I wish to assure the Deputy that we will avail of every opportunity to raise the concern as contained
very
in his question.
Well, Carol, I was just saying that 100 years ago we were reflecting, or we have been reflecting recently on what happened in our own country as we emerged back into our sovereignty, and perhaps it's an appropriate time to very vigorously raise these two small nations. And Minister, in relation to, have you met the World Uyghur Congress, or have you any intention of meeting them? And similarly, the International Campaign for Tibet. Have you met either of those organisations recently? I know we had visits of Dalai Lama and so on, but is that something that you would be keen on, given your interest in these areas in the past? Thanks, Caroline.
Minister, very briefly, thanks.
I wish to assure the Deputy that Ireland and our EU partners will continue to encourage a resumption of the meaningful dialogue with the Chinese government and other representatives. I believe it's important that while acknowledging and respecting the territorial integrity of China, that we also encourage the Chinese authorities to at all times respect the rights of all persons belonging to minorities and their right to freedom of expression. So
Thanks,
I wish
Minister.
to continue.
And the next